The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the How to Become a CFRE webinar session. My name is Ashley Gatewood, and I am the Communications and Marketing Manager at CFRE International. And over the next hour, I will share everything with you that you need to know to become a CFRE. I am joined today by my colleague, Paul Cavazos, on the back end, who will be answering your questions. So please type those into the question pane. And we'll get started with some FAQs. Firstly, the application cost is $875 at the regular rate, and it's US $700 if you are a member of a participating organization. So if you're a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AHP, ALDI, etc., you can get that lower rate. We have 30 participating organizations, and they are listed on our website, so you can see all of them there. I will send you a link to the recording within 24 hours. Unfortunately, we cannot answer really specific questions. If you say to us, I went to a nonprofit conference in Bangor, Maine in 2016, and I can't remember the name, how many points is it worth? We can't tell you that. It's just outside the scope of what we can do on this webinar. But you can always email those questions to us at succeed@cfre.org. So if you can keep your questions more high level, that will help us keep things moving along. We will also discuss today the impact of COVID-19 on testing, so please hold your questions about that until I get through the testing section, because we will most likely address what's on your mind. The candidate handbook, the test content outline, and the glossary will be mentioned today, and they are all available on our site. I will also include links to these items in the follow-up email. And today is going to count for 1 point of non-fundraising education in your CFRE education requirement. We would like to thank Connolly and Associates Fundraising today for their excellent promotional support. And with that, we will dive on in. So people think, why would I become a CFRE, right? It seems like a lot of hassle. It seems like a lot of work. Does it really matter? I've been fundraising for 10 years without a CFRE. I think I'm good. Okay, well, one thing is our hairdressers have a certification and a licensure, and we don't as fundraisers. And yet we might be dealing with tens of millions of dollars. People want to know that you have the fundraising knowledge to succeed. Your colleagues, your board, your donors, your stakeholders, they all want to know that you know your stuff. Throughout the CFRE process, a lot of people tell us that they gained so much new information, right? Because nobody knows everything. We very easily get into our swim lanes. Maybe it's bequests, maybe it's running special events, right? And we don't necessarily interact with all these other pieces of fundraising that are very important for us to know. And it will make you a more valuable asset to your organization, because how on earth could having a really well-rounded body of fundraising knowledge have any kind of drawback, right? It only gives you a better concept of how all the pieces of fundraising knit together and gives you more fundraising ideas. So you can take that back to your employer and begin implementing what you've learned during your study, even before you've become a CFRE, right? While you're preparing. People also tell us that they wanted to become a CFRE as a personal challenge that they wanted to take on. And if you're a manager and people report to you, you want to set a really good example for your team. You want to always be the smartest person in the room for the people that you manage in a lot of ways, right? Because they're looking up to you, they're taking direction from you. If you have a certification, that is more proof in the pudding that you are a person that has a fundraising body of knowledge grounded in best practices. Many people come to the CFRE because they say, I'm a lifelong learner. It was just a natural fit for me. And a number of people come to the CFRE also because they want to increase their earning potential. We have data from the Association of Fundraising Professionals 2019 Benefits and Compensation Report here. And the biggest pay scale advantages by far are in the US and Canada. In the US, the average pay bump for CFRE is 3 to 14% of their salary every year. That $700 initial application fee should be viewed as an investment that will come back to you many, many times over the course of your career. If you're in Canada, the compensation is that you earn on average about 25,000 Canadian dollars more versus a non-CFRE. That is a tremendous amount of money that you do not want to leave on the table. We'll talk now about the CFRE certification process at a high level, and then I will break this down throughout the presentation here. So the first step is to start your application at CFRE.org. You'll input your information and you'll select your test window. So this is important to know that during the application phase is when you are going to commit to a test window, and we'll go through test windows in more detail later. We recommend you double check your application. A lot of times people enter things like TBD as a reminder to themselves to go back and add information. You don't want any of that in your final application, so take the time to look it over again. And then you don't pay until you go to submit. So that's really important, right? It is no cost, no obligation to start this application. Even if you're on the fence about CFRE, go ahead and start it because there's no downside to it. Once you've submitted and paid, that's when one of our staff members will review your application. That's usually Paul, who is on the line with us today. And once he approves your application, you will be given an email with everything you know to schedule your exam. So we don't go too much into how to schedule your exam today because you will receive an email with everything you need to know. Then you'll sit for the exam at the nearest test center. Currently, we only have in-person testing. A number of test centers are open. We are working very hard to be able to get approval for remote testing. However, because we're accredited, it is not nearly as easy as it might be for some other organizations. If you're not planning to sit for the exam in the next 6 months, I really wouldn't worry so much about the testing landscape because we're in a very fluid situation where anything could happen, anything could change, right? But just know that we are working on trying to find that remote testing option for you. And then every 3 years you recertify, and towards the end of the presentation, I'll dig deep into how recertification works. If you haven't yet started your application, you can go on over to our website here, and you'll see there are 2 places on our homepage where you can click and get started at no cost. So now we're going to talk about the application, and the education section is the area where people tend to have the most questions. So we always begin with that. You will need 80 points, and you're probably thinking, okay, well, what the heck is a point? I will tell you in just a second. They need to have been earned in the last 5 years, with one exception, and that exception is your academic degrees. Your academic degrees, we will give you 10 points for a bachelor's, master's, JD, or doctoral for any year, any major. If you have a Spanish bachelor's from 2002, 10 points. If you have a computer science degree from 1984, it's a master's, 10 points, right? Any year, any major. 5 points per associate's degree, same thing. If you have an associate's degree in sociology from 2011, it's fine, it's 5 points. You can combine your degrees in any way. So if you have a double major, we can accept both of those degrees, but there is a maximum of 40 points from degrees. So if you have 16 master's degrees, that's very impressive, but unfortunately, we have to cap this at 40 points. And you do not need a degree to become a CFRE at all. If you have one, that's great. It's going to earn you some points. If you don't have a degree, that's totally fine. The way most people earn the bulk of their points is through education sessions. So that's really straightforward. 1 point equals 1 hour that you are in a session. 2 points equals 1 hour of you presenting a session. If you don't typically present, that's totally fine. You don't need to worry about it. You don't have to present as part of this. But if you do, just know that you can earn 2 points per hour. And then you can earn 3 points per hour for each hour the first time you present new material. So that very first time that you're unveiling a new presentation, we will give you 3 points per hour. And we can take up to 36 points max out of presenting. We can also give you up to 10 points for your attendance at non-fundraising instruction that's relevant, right? So what I mean by that is if you go on an Excel course or a business writing course, we can easily draw a line between that and your fundraising work, right? Obviously, it's going to tie in. But if you, for some reason, go on a chocolate making course or a yoga workshop, that is not going to count, right? We can't draw a line between that and your improved fundraising. So we do need to see that it is something really relevant. We have people submit all kinds of weird stuff, swimming courses, but just be sensible about it. And any session has to be at least 45 minutes to qualify. So you see now a lot of times at conferences, there are these like little 15-minute quick sessions, but that's not going to count. We do need to see that it is at least 45 minutes. Another way that you can earn points is through service learning, and that's just our term for volunteering. We can give you up to 10 points for this, and it's really straightforward. It's 1 point per year per organization that you volunteer with. So if you volunteer for 1 day in July on a beach cleanup, that's 1 point. If you volunteer at an after-school program 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 1 point. There's no minimum or maximum amount of time that you need to be volunteering with an org inside of each year. If you have a leadership role, so you're on a committee or a board with a nonprofit, and this could be your church, your temple, your mosque as well, your religious organizations, they also count for this. You will earn 2 points per year per org on which you served on a committee or a board. So let's say I served on a committee at my local animal shelter from November of 2019 to March of 2020. I'm going to get 2 points for my 2019 time, and I'm going to get 2 points for my 2020 time, right? So you see how that works. We can also award points for authoring. If you are a writer, this might be a good way to earn points, but the one thing to keep in mind is that it cannot be self-published. So people often say, okay, that's great, thanks for telling me about all this, but like what actually counts for my education? Good question. All of these things on your screen here are what are going to count. Webinars, lunch and learns. If you register for a conference and you watch it on the day, right? Everything's virtual now. You watch one virtual track, great. And then they send you a link and they say, we have recordings of all the sessions. If you go back and you watch those recordings, you can get points for those as well. The same, I know some conferences have only done audio recordings in the past, the same thing, that the audio recording is going to count. Academic courses, certificate courses, Razor's Edge courses, all of those are going to count towards your education. But there are certain things that are not going to count. Presentations you make for work. If I make a presentation in my board, that's me doing my job. That's not me being a presenter per se, right? I'm getting paid to make that presentation. If I train 4 of my staff on how to use our new database, again, I'm not presenting, I'm doing my job, so we can't award you any specific points for that. While we can accept 10 points of non-fundraising education that you attend, we cannot accept any non-fundraising material you present. So if you teach a course on how to dress for success, it's not fundraising related, right? So we're not going to be able to take that. And anything that happened more than 5 years ago, excluding academic degrees. If 2014 was a fabulous year for you going to conferences and you went to 6 conferences, unfortunately, they've all expired. However, if you have a lot of education that you did in 2015, keep in mind it's going to expire January 1 of 2021. So if you have a bunch of points from 2015, we highly recommend, if you want to use those, to make sure that you submit your application before the end of the year. Networking events, awards events, you just go and you have dinner and you watch people get awards, right? Mentoring sessions, podcasts, these are things that we cannot award points for. Now people say, okay, well, I went to a conference and I was there from 8 to 4:30. I must be getting 8.5 points for that. Well, that's not quite accurate. We have to look at the time you were actually in instruction, the time you were actually learning fundraising material, right? So you need to subtract out all of the breaks, any networking time, drinks with the exhibitor reception, you had to miss a session because you had to take a phone call, all of that needs to be subtracted out. And what that means is that normally people end up with maybe say 5 to 6.5 points at the end of the day for each day at a conference that they attend. So just keep that in mind that you're going to have to subtract all of that out. It's pretty easy though, right? Because you have the agenda and it tells you that. Some conferences have been pre-approved for CFRE education points. So if you take a look at your screen now, you'll see what a CFRE education points tracker looks like. If you have one of these, it makes everything easy peasy. You just go in, you tick up the little box, help yourself calculate. You can see on this tracker, it's already taken out all of the breaks, right? Super easy. But if you attend something that doesn't have a points tracker, it's totally fine. Just use the conference or event agenda to determine the amount of time that you were in the course. We recommend that you always save a copy of the agenda for your records, just so you know. And if we have a question on your application, maybe you tell us you spent 9 hours at a one-day conference. If we see that, we're going to ask for the agenda, right? So it's good to just keep those as a backup. Webinars, there's a bajillion webinars right now, and that is to your benefit because they count. So if you attend a webinar, just save your registration email or receipt as your proof. If you watched it on demand, so there was not a registration email or receipt, no worries. Just take a screenshot of the first and last slide, and you'll be good. At this point, a lot of times people go, oh my gosh, I've done all kinds of training and I have no idea what I went to. I cannot remember. And that's totally fine. You can jog your memory with old calendars, emails, credit card statements, expense reports, and you shouldn't be shy about this. Feel free to contact the event organizer. This isn't new to them. They get these requests all the time from people working on their CFRE that say, hey, I went to an event with you in 2017. I can't remember the name or the dates. Can you help me out? And people are usually super willing and happy to work with you on that. So just don't feel overwhelmed if you haven't kept your records on this, because there are definite ways that you can reconstruct what you went to. All right, and now this is a screenshot of what the inside of the application looks like in the education section. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole application, but this is important because it's a conference and a lot of people earn a hefty amount of points that way. You can see here that you're going to tell us it's a conference. However, you'll notice on the left, it says name of session a few down, right? It doesn't say name of conference, this is name of session. Put in the name of the conference there. We don't need to know every session you attended at that conference. We don't need to know every speaker that you saw at that conference, right? So for that speaker or for the presenter line, you're just going to write various. And that's totally fine. That's plenty. And then on the total number of contact hours, you'll determine what that is, right? So AFP Icon last year was worth 13.75 points. That's a pretty typical number of points for a 2.5 or 3 day conference. All right, and with that, we will turn it over to Paul, who has been answering questions on the back end. Paul, what questions do you have for us?
Great. So we'll start off with some really good questions that are coming in. The first one is, do you have to be currently employed either to start the application or take the test?
You do not need to be currently employed to start the application. We will talk about the employment requirement in the next set of slides. So you will need to have worked for 3 years out of the last 5 years, but we'll get more into that in just a few minutes.
Great. What about certification programs for colleges? Do they get points?
Yeah, they do. Paul, would you like to go through how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So The program itself is not eligible for points, but the individual classes that you take to complete the program may be eligible for credit, whether it's fundraising related or not. Of course, you get up to 10 points for non-fundraising education. So really depending on the classes within that program, whether it was a certification program in fundraising or outside of fundraising, you can list those classes for points as long as they occurred within the past 5 years. Our next question is, does a presentation have to be internal or an external audience? And is there a size of audience to qualify?
There's not a size of audience, but if by internal you mean for your employer, then that's not going to count. So it does need to be to, if you're doing it to your local CAGP chapter or something like that, that's going to count. But if you're doing it as part of your job, it will not count.
Great. When volunteering, does the committee have to be outside of our nonprofit that we're employed with?
Paul, can you take that one?
Sure. So we do allow you to volunteer for your own organization, but keep in mind that if it's compulsory volunteering, if it's something that's required as part of your job duties, then it cannot be counted as volunteer service. If it's outside of what you're required to do as part of your job, then then that certainly can be included for credit towards the service learning portion. One more question. Do you need certificates or confirmation of attendance?
So as long as you have your records of that, that should be fine. We do audit 1 out of 10 applications. Don't worry about that. Paul will work with you. But if you have those items, it is ideal.
Great. And actually, I do have one more question, and this is a really good one. A list of books is suggested to read. Can you tell the top 3 books that we recommend, and how close are the online practice questions to the real test?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm going to cover the resource reading list later in the presentation, so I'll go into that then.
Perfect.
Okay. Great. So professional practice is the next here. This is you working, and this is what I just brought up a minute ago. You need to have 36 points, and 1 point equals 1 month that you have been working. So you need to have worked for 36 months out of the most recent 5 years. If you're not currently working, you may still have 36 points from the most recent 5 years, but you will need that. Now, note, if you're a consultant, you need to know that we are only going to count your time as a consultant from when you first got a client. If I started my consultancy in April of 2020, but I didn't land my first client until July, we have to count the months as starting from July, because you doing your consultant website, branding, logo, yada, yada, that's not fundraising, right? We have to count from when you were fundraising, and that's when you had a client. 50% or more of your duties need to be fundraising related. So if you wear the PR hat half the time and the fundraising hat half the time, that's totally fine. But if you're working 20 hours a week, 100% of your duties need to be fundraising related. If you're not there, it's fine. If you haven't worked 36 months, I would go ahead and start the application and as you're working, let those months bank up. But you want to start your application because you want to be adding the education items that you've been attending. Professional performance is the funds you've brought in. We have 1 point equals 25,000 US dollars. People wonder why this is US dollars, and that's because we're accredited. So we're only allowed to have $1 figure. So we're not allowed to have, this is the amount in Thai baht, and this is the amount in Japanese yen, and this is the amount in New Zealand dollars. We have to just have one global dollar amount. So it is 25,000 US dollars equals a point. So this works out to about 1.375 million US dollars within the last 5 years. We look at this as a team sport. So you are fundraising over here, you just had a big gala event, and you're like, okay, it brought in $250,000. There's no way that you can say, all right, well, Tony brought in 40,000 of that, and Sherry brought in 20,000 of that, and Ashley brought in 10,000 of that, right? We can't parse that out. We don't know. So we're going to look at the fundraising amount raised as what your team has brought in. Now, if you work, and let me just say for events, we need the gross amount. And for planned gifts, they have to be received. You can't say, oh my gosh, millionaire XYZ called me up and said they're going to put a gift of $40 million in their will. Oh, sweet, I've got on my professional performance CFRE points. It won't work like that. The funds have to have actually come in. If you're in a smaller organization and you are not going to be able to meet this requirement on the fundraising front, we have alternative ways that you can earn points, which is through management or communications projects. We have a lot of these examples on our website. So if that's you, if you're in a smaller shop, feel free to take a look there to get some idea of what we're looking at. But it needs to have a start and an end date, right? So like a discrete project would be a rebranding that has a start and an end date. All right. Now, this is some of our best advice that we have, and that is update your application as you go. Some people think, oh, I'm not doing anything tonight. I think I'll do my CFRE application. And then they try to reconstruct 5 years of education they've done and places they've worked and clients they've had. And then they're like, oh man, this is rough. The best thing to do is just update your application a little bit at a time. After you attend an education event, add it. When you change employers, go ahead and update that in your CFRE application. You can jump in and out of your application as many times as you want. There's no limit. So we definitely recommend that you do that because you do not want to miss out on any of these points. Even if you do a 1-hour webinar somewhere, right? You want that point to count. You don't want to forget about it. Our recommendation is to store all of your documentation in your personal email. We have on the regular people who contact us and say, oh my God, I just left my job last week and all my CFRE proof is in an email I can no longer access. Don't let this be you. In your personal email, start a folder and call it CFRE proof and forward to yourself all of your registration emails, your soft copies of agendas, any receipts, anything like that that's going to help with serving as the documentation against the items that you're adding into your application. Again, you're not going to add those to your application, right? You're not adding your receipts to the application or any agendas, but that will just help in case we have a question about something. We've talked about the cost of initial certification of being $700 US for members of participating organizations, and that you're going to pay only when you're ready to submit your application. We do not offer split payments, so if you don't have all of the funds right now, just wait until you can make that one lump sum payment. But unfortunately, we can't divide payments without passing the cost along. And we work very, very hard to keep this certification price to a point that is easy for folks, because we definitely don't want to make that dollar amount go up. You may be wondering, what does my initial application fee include? What do I get for that? Well, you get the application review with no cost to resubmit. We send you a digital badge after you pass the exam saying you're CFRE that you can use on LinkedIn or your email signature or wherever you feel. We pay all the testing center fees out of that $700. So the testing centers are run by a company called Pearson VUE, and when you go to a testing center, you're not going to have to pay anything when you get there. And then the printing and mailing of your certificate. All right, and we're at our next question break.
Okay, great. So we're still getting lots of questions about volunteer service and other education. Just as a reminder, anything you include in your application has to have occurred within the past 5 years from your date of submission, and that does include your volunteer service. So the first question I have is, can you talk a little bit about listing a fundraising degree versus listing the courses related to that degree?
Sure, Paul, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, sure. So my recommendation would be, if you have completed a master's or bachelor's program within the past 5 years and you're getting ready to submit your application, you have to consider two things. One, is the degree fundraising specific? Are the classes that you took towards earning that degree fundraising related? If they are, you'll probably want to list some of the classes as opposed to the degree itself, because the degree is worth 10 points, but the classes that you take toward a degree are 15 points per each semester credit. So if you take a class that's a 3-semester credit course, you actually get 45 points for that course. You cannot list both. So keep that in mind as you're going through and adding your degrees to your application. If it was within the past 5 years and fundraising related, I would recommend listing the classes themselves as opposed to the degree. If there was a non-fundraising related degree, or if it was outside that 5-year time period, you'll just have to list the degree for those 10 points. Are there advantages to a non-fundraiser in the industry to obtain the CFRE? For reference, I work in an advancement shop in prospect management.
If you're not actively fundraising, you're not going to be able to meet the requirements, is the only thing there.
Right. Further to that, we do consider prospect management part of the development program. So if you're looking and securing donors, even though you're not directly soliciting or raising those funds, you would still be eligible to apply as long as 50% of your job is related to prospect management or other advancement related duties. I started an application many years ago, but due to some reasons, I was unable to complete it, and I have returned to fundraising recently. Should I start a new application or redo my old application?
See if you can log into your old one. If you have things in there that are more than 5 years old, they would have expired. But if you think you have some things within that 5-year time period, then I would recommend trying to log in.
That's right. And if you have any issues with accessing your account, you can always email us at succeed@cfre.org. Do you have to accumulate 80 points before the exam?
Yes, you must have 80 points at the time you submit your application.
Correct. And you must meet all the other requirements as well. You cannot submit an application without meeting the requirements for each of those 3 sections.
Yeah.
After you apply, when is the deadline to sit for the exam?
Oh, we're going to get into that in just a minute, so stay tuned.
Perfect. And one more question. What about past trackable fundraising dollars instead of education? I think what this question is asking is, can you use money raised as opposed to fulfilling the education requirement? If I'm interpreting that correctly, then unfortunately the answer is no. You cannot, even if you have a surplus of points in one section, you still have to meet the requirement for each of the other 2 sections.
Exactly, yes.
Great, thanks.
All right, I saw we had a question too about the application review. That usually takes a few business days. All right, so now we're going to talk about the test windows. And now we're going to get into things about the exam and studying. So if you have questions about that, you may want to hold them until I get through this section because we are pretty thorough here. So you can see here we have 4 test windows every year, and each one has an application deadline on the front of it. So that means that if you want to sit for the exam, let's say on April 30th, the last date you can get your application in to sit is April 15th. Now, we definitely don't recommend, if you want to sit for the exam on April 16th, don't send it to us on April 15th because we need time to review it and you need time to set up the testing with Pearson VUE. But just know that that's how the deadlines and the testing work. Now, you're going to select your test window in your application. And if you write to us and you say, you know, my exam's coming up next week and I still didn't study as much as I should have, can I move my date, my test window? There's a US $35 fee. However, if it's a change due to COVID, the testing center is closed due to COVID, or you have COVID, then there's not a fee to change. So just let us know if that happens, and we're more than happy to work with you. Now, once your application is approved, you're going to have 1 year to sit for the exam. So I think that was the question that just came in during the last question break there. So you have 1 full year. Now, obviously, if you submit your application on December 15th, the last day we offer an exam in a year is November 30th, right? So if you submit on December 15th, you're not going to technically have till December 14th to sit the exam. It's going to be within the windows here. All right, so a lot of people think, well, how long am I supposed to study? If you have 5 years or more of experience, plan to study at least 40 hours. If you have fewer than 5 years of experience, plan to study at least 80 hours. And we're going to talk in the coming slides about how you can determine what you need to study and how to do this in the most cost-effective way. All right, so the exam looks at these 6 knowledge domains. Super important, please take a look at this slide. If you've got another window up, just please direct your attention back to this webinar. This is exactly how the exam is broken down. So it's across these 6 knowledge domains, and you'll see that securing the gift and relationship building together make up 49% of this exam. You're going to want to really be sure that you know your stuff in those areas. Now, when we look at these knowledge domains, right, they're very broad. So we break them down in what we call our test content outline. I'm seeing a lot of questions about the test, how to test coming up. So I'm going to get to that in a minute within this section here. So this test content outline breaks down those 6 domains into all the little nitty-gritty pieces. So you'll know precisely what we're talking about, right? Because it's really vague if we just say securing the gift. But these are all of the pieces here, so you're going to know precisely what the exam is looking for. All right, so with those 6 knowledge domains on that test content outline I showed you on the last slide, my recommendation is that you print the test content outline from our website, and then you take a highlighter and highlight everything that you don't feel like you would feel comfortable answering an exam question on. So you might notice everything's clustered in knowledge domain 2, or maybe they're in 4 and 5, or maybe they're all over the place, right? This resource reading list on our website is going to show you exactly how to know which books to use to study. So it will show you which knowledge domains each one covers, and you'll notice the second one here, Fundraising Basics, is comprehensive, and we do have a couple comprehensive books. So if you're looking for that big overall review, pick a comprehensive book. Most people pick 1 to 3 books. So we have 14 books on the list. We don't expect anyone to read all 14. You're just going to pick the 1 to 3 that address the gaps in knowledge that you have. You may want to borrow books from the library or new CFREs. A number of libraries have these books. And you may want to request that your employer purchase them for your team. This is a great way that your employer can contribute to your CFRE journey, and then the books could be made available for your other team members. And if you're going to do a study group, you may want to decide with your study group who buys what books and divide and conquer it that way. We don't recommend that you use any versions of books that are not on the resource reading list. So if we're on version 4 for a book and you have version 1 at home, you need to look at the current version. Now, a lot of people really like the Achieving Excellence in Fundraising book. This is a comprehensive book, and you can see on your screen here that this is a screenshot from Amazon Canada. It is also available on the regular.com Amazon site. Different countries I haven't checked, but you can have a look. And I bring this up because this book is really, really popular, but if you time it right, you might be able to get it for free as an audiobook. So if you do a free Audible trial with Amazon, they will often let you access this audiobook for free for a month. If you have a birthday coming up, or it's a holiday where no one knows what to get you for a gift, you may want to add a book to your wish list that you're looking for here. Now, we have a number of free resources on our website that will help you prepare. One is the test content outline, which we've talked about. We have a PDF of a study plan template that a lot of people like that helps you kind of break your plan out into weeks. We have a study groups page with information on how to start your own study group or how to join one. And you're very fortunate right now because there are a number of virtual study groups. So even if you're in Seattle, but maybe there's a study group in Chicago, you could go ahead and join that. All right, the candidate handbook, that's the whole A to Z of the CFRE process, is also on our website. And then the glossary. This one's really important because the glossary is the language of the exam. So when we say stewardship, exactly what do we mean? When we say donor, what exactly do we mean? So that there's no X factor where you think, oh, I wonder if in my neck of the woods we're using a term differently to how other people do. And then we also have a link to our CFRE exam webinar recording. There are some additional resources that we have that are paid. So I'm seeing some questions come up here about different editions of books, if they're applicable. Just have a look on the resource reading list, and that'll show you all of the editions that are current. So for the resources we have that are paid, I firstly just want to say you don't need to use these at all. If you don't want to pay for them, people pass all the time without these, but I just want you to be aware that they're there in case it's of interest. We have this CFRE exam compass study guide that came out earlier this year. And this is really ideal if you need help structuring your study time. If you're just like, I don't know, I'm really bad at holding myself accountable, this will help you. You'll still need to purchase the books that you're going to use to study, but this will help you keep on track. And then the other tool we have that is very popular is our practice exam. So if you take a look at the test content outline and you think, oh geez, I still really don't know what I don't know, the practice exam will sort that out for you pretty quickly. So that has a bank of questions. It's also great if you have a lot of anxiety about test taking. You can get yourself some practice there, and then it's going to show you what you got wrong and right, so you will know where to study. So what is the CFRE exam like? It's global. So whether you take it in Vancouver, Miami, Paris, it is the same exact exam. There are no country or tax specific questions. And it's written at the 5-year practice level. So that's why if you have fewer than 5 years experience, we recommend that you study more for this, because it is written at that 5-year level. It's 200 multiple choice questions with 4 options per question. That means the correct answer is looking right at you, right? Now, you're going to be selecting the best answer. There may be multiple answers that look correct, but we're looking for the best answer. It's often it's obviously testing best practice fundraising, but it is common that you'll see a question that'll say, what should you do first, right? So you need to be sure that you understand the order of how certain things are done. And think donor-centrically. If you get stuck between 2 answers, and they both look really close, ask yourself which is the most donor-centric answer, and that will often help you tie break that. Somebody has asked if there are any practice tests available. There are. They're the ones that are on our website that I just went over. So if you go to the study aid section of our website, you will find a link to the practice exam there. You will have 4 hours to sit for the exam, and that is a very generous amount of time. We get all of the data back from Pearson VUE about how long it takes people to sit for the exam, because we always want to be sure that we're giving people ample time. And most people don't take more than 3.5 hours. So you're going to have time. You'll have time to check your work, as long as you just keep yourself moving through it. Every question on it is going to tie back to the test content outline. So if you're familiar with that test content outline, you really don't need to feel like you're going to be served a whole bunch of curveballs. You can move backwards and forwards inside the exam. So that's really helpful, because if you think, oh my gosh, I have no idea what the answer is to question 18, but you get to question 111 and it jogs your memory, that's perfect, because you can go back to that first question. The score range is 200 to 800, and we have all of the information about how the scoring is done on our website. I won't get into it here because it's very heavy on the psychometrician aspect of it. 500 is a passing score, and that is a firm 500. So if you get a 498, we can't help with an extra 2 points. It has to be 500. We're accredited, so everyone must meet that same standard. The pass rate is about 80%, which is very much in line with certifications. For people that know CPAs, there's one CPA exam with a 48% pass rate. The PMI, Project Management International exam, that has around a 63% pass rate. So the CFRE certification exam is very much in line. And honestly, if it had a 100% pass rate, you'd probably say, oh, this is a joke, anyone can pass it. And you know what, you would be right. So just think about that. All right, now don't think catastrophically. I think oftentimes people go into the exam and they think, oh my gosh, this is not gonna go well. I'm really scared. I haven't sat for an exam since college. Don't think catastrophically. Don't worry about it. Don't put yourself in a bad frame of mind before you even start. Just think positively. It has an 80% pass rate. If you study, you're going to be in really good shape. All right, now here is how you find a testing center. We've had some questions come in about this. If you come to this URL here, and Paul can't look this up on the back end for you, this is self-serve. If you go to this URL on your screen, and you can type in your city or your postal code, zip code, and then it is going to show you all of the test centers that are near you. So you will have a good idea. And it'll have, if you click on where it says test center information, that's going to show you all their contact information. This is what a CFRE exam space at Pearson VUE looks like. And there will be security cameras. There will be individual testing stations. The security is really high. You will probably have to leave your phone in your car or a locker. They don't allow you to bring any papers in. So just know it is under very strict security, which should help you feel good because we don't have people leaking answers or bringing in notes. All right, so what happens with you when you finish? And somebody asked if it's a written test or on a computer. It's on a computer. It's in a Pearson VUE testing center with, we saw those computer banks. And when you finish, your score appears immediately. So you will know while you're at the testing center exactly what your score is. You will not see the questions you got right or wrong. And that's to protect the integrity of the exam, right? We don't want you to go, oh my gosh, I got question 8 wrong and I should have picked B. And you know what? My colleague is going to take this exam in a week. I should tell her this. You know, that's why we're not telling you what's right or wrong. And then within 1 business day, you will get a confirmation email from us that you've passed. And at that point, you can go ahead and shout it from the rooftops that you're a CFRE. If you do it right after you leave the test center won't have notified us. So if you go on LinkedIn 5 minutes afterwards and you say, I'm a CFRE, I passed, and then your boss calls us, we can't verify that, right? We don't want to steal your thunder. So just make sure that you wait until you get that confirmation email from us that we have you in our system as a CFRE. We mail certificates monthly from Virginia in the US, and you'll get a digital badge within 1 week. Now, retaking the exam, we've had a couple questions come in about this. And I always say, please don't think about failing the exam before you've even submitted your application. Think positively. I'm going to go through this information, but please don't stress out about it. There's a 30-day wait period before you can take it again. And there is a $375 retake fee, which people think is really steep. And it is. It should be a deterrent. We want people to study right the first time. There's a maximum of 3 attempts on 1 application. This pretty much never happens, so don't worry about it as far as maxing out your attempts. So study thoroughly the first time, and you'll be in a lot better position. You won't have to worry about retaking it. Now, a lot of people have some support from their employer. Over 50% of CFREs say that their employer paid for part or all of their initial certification fee. You may want to build that into your next job's contract. And if your boss is not open to that, perhaps they might want to purchase the books that you'll use to study or provide you with a day off before the exam. We have a lot of people who take the day off before the exam just so that they can go into it with a clear mind. CFRE set an example for the teams they lead, so your employer should look upon that very favorably. And we all know ethics and accountability have never been more vital, right? We always hear about these scandals from charities and donors losing confidence. So your employer should want to know that you and the people on your team are doing everything that they can to ground their fundraising in ethical best practices. And obviously, they're investing in their staff to be even more proficient in their roles. And we've had a couple questions coming about the slides, so they're going to be in the follow-up email, so there will be a copy of the slides in there. Recertification, that happens every 3 years. and it's a completely online application. The recertification fee is $510 US at the regular price, and it's $408 if you're a member of a participating organization. So you know this is coming up, right? Once you pass and you become a CFRE, you know in 3 years when you're going to need to recertify. We highly recommend that you talk to your employer and have that built into your contract if you want. It's really not a large amount considering it's over the course of 3 years. There's no exam required for recertification. Once you pass that exam the first time, you will never have to sit for it again unless you lapse. And here are the points requirements for recertification. So again, this is what you need to do over a 3-year period. Most people find this to be really achievable. You'll note here that this assumes or requires that you work for 2.5 years within 36 months, right? So you need to have worked for 30 months within 36 months. If you get laid off, you're on extended medical leave, there's some reason you can't make that 30 points, that's fine. Contact us. Paul will be happy to talk to you and work with you on that. All right, so, and the reason we have recertification is because that's why CFREs command more of a salary and have such a good standing within fundraising, because personally, I have a master's degree in advertising from 2005. How out of date and old is that right now, right? That's the reason why people love to hire CFREs, because you're recertifying every 3 years. You're showing that you are consistently raising funds, you're consistently going on continuing education courses, and you're consistently working in this field. So that's why the recertification is required every 3 years. That's what brings the level of gravitas to the CFRE. So next steps, if you haven't already, you can start your application on our website and log today's webinar, because this is your one point of non-fundraising education that you've earned today. Keep track of those points as you earn them, and feel free to speak to your boss about supporting your CFRE journey. You're a fundraiser, you know everything about talking to people for support and investing, so it is a great conversation to have. And with that, we have some minutes left, so we will use them for a Q&A. All right, Paul, do we have any other questions?
All right, we got a ton. Yeah, we got a ton of great questions coming in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ashley? Okay, perfect. So I just want to say quickly, sorry if I haven't been able to respond to your question. Feel free to email us at succeed@cfre.org if we did not get to your question today. So I will start. We have some questions related to professional performance. So let's go back there for a little bit. Would the total amount raised include cash on hand only, or can the total amount raised include gifts with pledge payments?
Paul,
and I'm happy to take that one, Ashley.
Yeah.
So you can, yes, perfect. So you can include gifts with pledge payments as long as those pledges are irrevocable. So we only allow irrevocable pledges to be included for credit as part of the performance requirement. Another great question. If you oversee all fundraising for an organization, can you count all the donations that have come in?
Yeah, Paul, you want to go ahead with that one?
Sure. So that's a great question, and we do have good news on that front. Really, anytime any funds that are raised as a result of a candidate's supervision or management, or as a result of the candidate's involvement in cultivation, solicitation, or strategy for the gift can be counted. If you're a part of a team, you are welcome for all team members to report those same funds. If you have a responsibility for one area of a larger effort, then you count those funds only. If you provided significant cultivation, but let's say a volunteer or other leader made the ask, you are still eligible to claim those funds. So we know that fundraising is a team sport, and that's why we allow certainly everyone who works on a team effort to secure funds to list all of those funds. Do grants totaling in 2 million count in terms of earning points for professional performance? So we had a lot of questions asking if grants qualify. Yes, money that is secured through grants is eligible So there is a section in the professional performance section where you can select grants, and then you'll list the amount of funds that were secured as a result of those grants. We have some questions related to application processing. If your application is rejected, is the fee refundable?
No, the fee is not refundable.
Right. So further to that, we don't necessarily outright reject applications. We always give candidates an opportunity to fulfill any deficiencies, and you'll have up to 1 year to do so. If you want to withdraw your application within the first 30 days, you are eligible for a refund minus a $50 processing fee. After 30 days, there is a $300 withdrawal fee. So we definitely encourage you to continue to work on your application to fulfill any deficiencies, but you're not, unless your job isn't eligible, we typically don't outright reject applications. We'll always give you an opportunity to fix any mistakes or any deficiencies. If your application is approved in 2020, but you don't sit for the exam until 2021, will the education that you listed from 2015 expire?
No, it's fine. Once your application's approved, it's all good.
Perfect. And we had a lot of questions related to failing the exam as well. So just to reiterate, if you don't pass the exam, there's a 30-day retake period. You cannot take the exam again for 30 days. You are offered 3 exam attempts per application. So the first exam attempt is covered with that $700 fee. Each re-exam attempt is $375. Let's see here. Were there any questions that you saw that you wanted to take care of, Ashley?
There's one here, how far back can volunteer hours go? So because they're part of education, that again is going to be going back 5 years. Here's another one. How do you determine education points from a non-certified fundraising conference? So essentially, if we haven't certified it, it's just like anything else that's fundraising that, like we mentioned, may not have been pre-approved for CFRE points. If it's fundraising education, it's more than likely going to count. So if the organizer has not pre-approved it, but let's say you went to a 90-minute session about updating your bequest toolkit, that would be 1.5 hours. So if it's not pre-approved, don't worry about it. If it's fundraising related, it's more than likely going to count. And free webinars on fundraising will count as well, absolutely.
Perfect. Here's a good one. How do you find out if you are part of a participating organization?
Sure. If you go over to our website and you go to the About section, you'll see a list of all the participating organizations. So we have 30, and there will also be a link in the handouts that I'm going to email you within 24 hours. So if you're a member of a professional organization, that's what we're talking about. And there's a question here too about how close is the online practice exam to the real test. You'll hear people say all different things on this. The online practice exam is really there to help you decide or determine what you know and you don't know and where you need to study. So it's not going to be a super close match against exactly what's being asked on the live exam. No question on the practice exam appears on the live exam.
Perfect. Here's a really great question. A conference has been listed as offering recertification credit. Can I use this towards my initial certification?
So recertification credit isn't really something that we have. They probably just meant CFRE credit. So if it's approved for CFRE points, then you're good to go.
Perfect. Here's another great question. As an American, am I eligible to fundraise abroad and still qualify for the certification?
Absolutely. We're a global certification. So no matter where you are in the world raising funds, that's fine. And I had seen a question come in earlier too, asking if the language of the exam was heavily American. So it's not. That's why we have the glossary. The glossary is so that anyone anywhere in the world will feel prepared to know what the terminology used is, but we're using accepted best practice terminology.
Great. Do you have any recommendations on finding/joining a study group?
Yes, for sure. If you go to our website in the study aid section, you'll see a page all about study groups. So there'll be a tip sheet on how you can form your own study group as well as find some virtual study groups.
Great. So we've been getting this one a lot too. Does education need to be CFRE approved to qualify?
No, it does not have to be approved. It does not have to be pre-approved.
Here's a question related to projects. What defines a measurable impact for communications and management projects?
Yeah, so we have all of those examples on our website. I don't know, Paul, if you want to say anything that you're specifically talking about, but if you create a new e-newsletter, you rethink it totally, right? And this is going to be a communications project. You redo your newsletter A to Z. You have maybe a consulting firm you're working with, and you change when you send it, and you've done all these metrics about best send times, yada, yada. And then you launch your new e-newsletter, and it's brought in 25% more donations than your last one, right? That's a measurable impact. We need to see the impact that it's having on the fundraising. So I hope that example helps.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I would have said as well. All right.
Well, thank you everybody so much. I know we're at time, and if we didn't get to your question, I do apologize. Feel free to email succeed@cfre.org. And it's not a problem. I see one here about if you don't have communications or management projects. That's totally fine. You don't have to have those. It's just if you need them to make up that points balance there. So thank you all so much. It was great to have you with us today. We look forward to reviewing your application, and we wish you all the best. Take care.
Thanks all.